Assalamu alaikum. Just a quick housekeeping item. If everyone can please migrate towards the aisles as more people will be coming in, just so they don't disrupt your viewing experience. You guys don't want to miss Brother Taher. So let's scoot in as much as you can, please. Sisters as well, but it looks like you already got it figured out, so we're good. But no migrations. No forced migrations. No forced migrations. It's up to you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My name is Khalid Mustafa. Been a part of the community thanks to an introduction from Brother Ayman Talib something like 15 years ago. Happy to be here. Inshallah, today we have a great program for everyone. And someone who is an inspiration is going to be. Just want to quickly revisit the My Ummah series, Suffering Exists, and how that fits into our worldview as Muslims. This week, obviously, we have Brother Taher Herzallah. He'll be speaking to the historical Palestine, how it came about and how it got to where it is today. Inshallah, next week, we'll be discussing how American Muslims can go and serve the cause of the Ummah, serve the cause of Islam, and establish Islam in this country. The speaker is to be decided, so we'd love some volunteers, if there are any. And then finally, Sheikh Abdel Nasser Jangda will be discussing what is incumbent upon us as believers in terms of the services and support that we provide each other, inshallah. So definitely don't miss out, tune in. Now, today, inshallah, we're going to, I want to introduce Brother Taher Herzallah. Taher Herzallah? Oh, after the Quran. Okay. Where are we at? The slides are off. Sorry, they threw me off. So, Quran first. All right, so Brother Ayman Talib will be giving us a Quran recitation, inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. أولما أصابتكم مصيبة قد أصبتم مثليها قلتم أنى هذا قل هو من عند أنفسكم إن الله على كل شيء قدير وما أصابكم يوم التقى الجمعان فبإذن الله وليعلم الذين نافقوا وقيل لهم تعالوا قاتلوا في سبيل الله أو ادفعوا قالوا لو نعلم قتالا لاتبعناكم هم للكفر يومئذ أقرب منهم للإيمان يقولون بأفواههم ما ليس في قلوبهم والله أعلم بما يكتمون الذين قالوا لإخوانهم وقعدوا لو أطعنا إن كنتم صادقين ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون فرحين بما آتاهم الله من فضله ويستبشرون بالذين لم يلحقوا بهم من خلفهم ألا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون يستبشرون بنعمة من الله وفضل وأن الله لا يضيع أجر المؤمنين الذين استجابوا لله والرسول من بعد ما أصابهم القرح للذين أحسنوا منهم واتقوا أجر عظيم الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل لم يمسسهم سوء واتبعوا رضوان الله والله ذو فضل عظيم إنما ذلكم الشيطان يخوف أولياءه فلا تخافوهم وخافوني إن كنتم مؤمنين صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Ayman. Inshallah, dhikr of the week. We are repeating last session's dhikr of the week. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. We are constantly hearing it in the videos being shared from the brave and courageous people of Gaza. May Allah be with them. And it's truly inspiring. Speaking of this exact, truly powerful. Bara al-Adra, he's going to give us some spoken word, inshallah.
I'm going to be reading a poem I wrote about Palestine. It's called We'll Always Have the Right to Return. Maybe sometimes people are wondering about, why are all these protesters out? Are they just trying to shout? They're so strong, marching with no doubt. Their number is always at a very high rate. And what's this thing they're talking about? Something called hate. Why are they stating that Israel's an apartheid state? Staying up, watching news till a time that's later than late. The reason is grievous, till an extent that'll make you prostrate. That we were living our lives peacefully up to a certain date. It's been told from a generation to another that it's 1948. We woke up one day and found people who were trying to confiscate the land we've lived on, harvested all our crops and ate. We looked for supporters, but never had a single mate. When we refused to give our houses to them, they would attack us to death to fully dominate. Our houses were out there, just sitting like bait, for the Air Force to hit with a very basic aim. We were always left in tears and pain. But I've never understood why the media was the oppressor's allies, stating that Israel's acts aren't war crimes. But what they didn't know is that Gaza will never cry, because its people know Palestine will never die. They don't understand how bombing children isn't self-defense. We'll fight back till the war gets even more intense. And they'll see that our statements are no longer future tense. O Israel, you will learn that we'll always have the right to return.
Allahu Akbar.
Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, now I want to introduce Brother Taher Herzallah. He is the Director of Outreach and Community Organization for AMP. He's one of the Irvine 11, one of the individuals that even as a young adult. And finally, he is also a PhD student out of the Minneapolis area in American Studies with a focus on Islamic and political activism as well.
Jazakallah khair, Khalid. Alright, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala khatim al-anbiya wal mursaleen. Muhammad salawatullahi alayhi wa sallam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man ittaba'ahu bi ihsan ila yawm ad-din. I greet you with peace. I greet you in considering the circumstances, inshallah, with joy that we are here gathered to discuss a topic that the entire community is engaged in now, but a topic that we have dedicated our lives to, and that is, of course, Palestine. But Palestine not just as a region, Palestine as a cause, Palestine as an idea. And this is something that, inshallah, we will discuss tonight. And so I'm going to be going back as far back as the Philistines, ancient history, thousands of years ago, just to discuss the backdrop as to the narrative discussions that are taking place right now. Because there are those who will argue, especially from the Zionist camp, that this is a centuries-long until the Day of Judgment. And while there is an incredible amount of history in this region, the Zionists trying to reduce this topic to a discussion where only they understand how to deal with it is a big problem. Because they want the rest of the world to leave them be as they continue to colonize and occupy the Palestinian people. And what we're making very clear is that the issue today is the issue of occupation, the issue today is the issue of apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. And it doesn't matter who was there 5,000 years ago, or 4,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago. What matters is what's happening now, because no one is held accountable for what people did in the past. We're held accountable for what we do now and in the future. And so, it's very important to understand that context, inshallah, as we discuss. I will admit, I am not a historian, nor am I a scholar in ancient history, nor am I an anthropologist, and so I am basing my talk on research that's been done already on this subject. I don't want to bore you, but I made the presentation a little bit wordy to give you the opportunity to take pictures, to copy the information, to use it in your future presentations and your discussions, so that you can be well equipped, inshallah, to address any of the questions or engage in debates as necessary, inshallah. All right? So, I'm using the text of a Palestinian scholar as the basis of my presentation. His name is Dr. Nur Masalha. Any of you have heard of him before? Any of you read his book, this one that I'm... Okay. This book came out a few years back. It's called Palestine, a 4,000-Year History. And the director of the Center for Religion and History and the Holy Land Research Project at St. Mary's University in the UK, in the United Kingdom. He's written extensively on the subject, written many books over the past 30 years on the subject of Palestinian history, and I found this text to be very informative, very enlightening, and it continues to be one of the best sellers actually right now, especially considering the current situation. A lot of people are going online looking for books to buy on Palestine, looking to understand more, and this book right here is popping up on the Amazon search as one of the top 10 books for Palestine being sold around the world right now. And so I do highly recommend it. I do have the book myself, and I've enjoyed reading it. It's a very long book. It's about 600 pages, but it goes through a very long period of history. And I typically don't like to go in these types of history discussions, because for me the issue of Zionism, which tries to appropriate ancient history in order to advance its agenda, diverts the discussion away from what is currently taking place. And so when they bring it back to the ancient history, this commonly diverts the discussion away from what is actually taking place. Palestine's ancient history. To understand the terminology of the communities and civilizations and groups of people that lived in Palestine over the past several millennia. And I think that's important for us to understand, but not necessarily important for us to use in the discussions that we have about Zionism, because again, Zionism is a modern construct over the last 150 years. Talking about Palestine and its history over the past 5,000 years, one of the longest inhabited places on earth. We have cities and towns in Palestine today that have been the longest continuously inhabited places on earth. Living there for so long, and it has witnessed so many civilizations and empires come along over the years, and has engaged in a mixing of cultures that's from Europe and Asia and Africa over the past several millennia. So it's a very, very important place in the world. It's sort of the center of the world in many ways, culturally, economically, politically, and it continues to be today this place for people. This book challenges the colonial approach to Palestine and the pernicious myth of a land without a people, and argues for reading the history of Palestine with the eyes of the indigenous people of Palestine. Anybody heard of this term before? A land without a people? For a people without a land? Yeah. Anybody care to explain what that might mean?
Basically, that no one was really there.
Yes.
They're trying to picture. So in America, we know that the Native Americans were here, and there was a genocide that occurred.
Exactly.
But they're going there where we have 4,000 years of history.
Yeah.
And they're acting like it's just nobody was there. It was
Yes.
deserted.
There's two contradictory claims that the Zionists make when it comes to Palestine. First claim they make is that for thousands of years, Jews have lived in Palestine, and so therefore we have a right to occupy this land, to be in this land, right? But on the other hand, they make another claim, that they say that Palestine was a land for a people, the Jews, for a people without a land, right? And so basically the idea is two contradictory things. You can say you've been living here for thousands of years, but at the same time you're saying the land is empty, so how does that make sense? Right? There's a contradictory aspect to this, there's a negation of the claim, and sometimes the argument don't make it in the same sentence. And so it's important for us to understand that this is a place that's been continuously inhabited for thousands of years by a lot of different people, even before the advent of Judaism itself, and even before Ibrahim alayhi salam came to this land. Representation. But despite the fact that for over 150 years, Europeans have been engaged in archaeological discoveries and findings, have yet to be able to empirically prove that there was a kingdom of David that existed in Palestine. As a matter of fact, this was one of the sticking points of the negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis in the decades of the past, where Palestinian leadership basically said, here you guys have been since 1967, digging under Masjid al-Aqsa to find your temple. And so for the past 56 years now, they've been doing that. And yet, Solomon's temple existed in that location. Despite the numerous attempts, the excavations they've been doing, all of that has not yielded any actual result. Yes, sir?
So, even if they do find a temple, and because we do believe that David was a king, he was a king somewhere, but
yes.
Even if they do find a temple, what is that supposed to mean?
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say earlier, is that the argument that there is a presence historically does not negate the fact that there is an occupation and apartheid and ethnic cleansing now, right? It's still something that's happening, right? But there's also another sort of assumption, or you could say a presumption, that the Palestinian people of today are not somehow related to or identify with the people of antiquity that lived in the region. There's just an aberration. They just exist out of nowhere. They just came out of nowhere. And that's a big problem, because the argument basically is that the Palestinian people have no connection to the land, but also there's a contradictory claim also by the Zionists that there was no such thing as a Palestinian people. So you're constantly dealing with these contradictions all the time, these arguments that they're making. Oh, there wasn't anybody on the land, but then also there's Palestinians that are evil and we have to kill them because they're on the land. So where do these Palestinians come from? Right? So this is also a contradiction that's constantly taking place. So that's one of the key findings, or one of the major claims in the book is what I just stated earlier, that after 150 years and thousands of biblical excavations, nothing proves the claims that Zionists are making about this land. That's number one. Number two is the lack of material or empirical evidence for a united kingdom of David and Solomon is almost universally recognized by archaeologists in the West and also by some leading Israeli archaeologists as being something that's evidently lacking. Evidently lacking. Now, mind you, Nur Masaha is strictly looking at this from a archaeological, scientific standpoint. He's not looking at it from a biblical scripture standpoint. He's not looking at it even from a Quranic standpoint. He's strictly looking at it from scientific fact, right? Because we have our own narrations, obviously in the Quran, about what existed in this land, or where these communities came from, or where different prophets were. So we have our own narrative. Right? What he's looking at, he's strictly looking at it from a archaeological findings, excavation standpoint. All right. He says that the Jewish contribution, another claim, Jewish contribution to the multi-faith pluralist heritage and long history of Palestine is undeniable. But the genres of fiction and storytelling of the Old Testament may or may not contain some historical facts. So he makes that very clear where he stands on it. He says the Quran and theological traditions of Islam offered an inclusive, multi-religious representation of the shared heritage of Jerusalem. So he doesn't make an argument that the Quran is wrong. He just says that the Quran and the Muslim tradition in Palestine allow for a multiplicity of faith groups to exist in one land in security and safety, which is the fact of history, which is something that we all know very well. What he focuses on a lot in the book is the name Palestine. And this is his major primary claim, that the name Palestine is continuously and uninterruptedly found in ancient, medieval, and modern histories, and historical sources, including ancient Egyptian and Assyrian inscriptions and texts. And he has the different variations of the way that the term Palestine is used. Classical Greek texts and literature, Roman and Byzantine administrative divisions of the region and sources, and medieval Arabic and Islamic Arabic sources on Palestine. And then he also includes modern Hebrew definitions and naming of the region, and all modern European languages and sources, including the British and English language designations of the land as Palestine. We know that the British Mandate was the British Mandate over what? Palestine. They didn't say the Holy Land. They didn't say Judea, Samaria. They didn't say Israel, ancient Israel. No, they said the British Mandate of Palestine, because that's the term that they referred to. That was years and years and years and years later, right? This is in the early 1900s when they're designating this land as a land of Palestine. So clearly, there's a historical precedent and authoritative connection to the naming of the land of Palestine. And again, his effort here is to debunk the myths that come with the Zionist co-optation of ancient history. He's saying that they don't have an understanding of ancient history. They don't even have an archaeological evidence for what they're saying, but they're constantly making these claims to co-opt Jewish tradition in order to advance their colonial agenda. I have a lot of things here, but I'm not going to read all of it. But basically, the idea of the naming of the land of Palestine, or what designated the land of Palestine, is an area from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And this could be, of course, described in different ways, and we'll talk about what it was called in the Islamic period as well, because it was not referred to as Palestine. It was referred to as Beitul Maqdis and the areas around Beitul Maqdis. And so Palestine emerges later on, especially although it was used at that time and during the Greek and Roman period, but the Arabic language description for this land was a little bit different. And then it picks back up after Abdul bin Marwan. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. I'm going to talk about not just 5, I'm going to talk about 6 stages today, because post Abbasi Khilafa Palestine. That could be another lecture we're going to have to set up, inshallah, because there's so much to pack into a small presentation that's only going to be for 45 minutes. So we're going to talk about certain things. Inshallah, we're going to go through them as quickly as possible. But this is just to give you an idea of the range of time that I'm going through. I mean, the late Bronze Age, you're talking about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Okay? It's a very, very early period. We're going to talk about these people called the Philistines. All right. The Philistines are people. You've heard the term the Philistines before. You've heard about these people before. Okay. The common historical assessment of the Philistines is that they were a seafaring people that came somewhere from the Aegean area, like Greece, basically, the Aegean Islands, the Aegean Sea, and came to the shores of Palestine in a very like about as early as 12,000 BCE. Okay, and they settled in that area. They cultivated the area. They built towns and cities. Some of the earliest cities built in the world were built by the Philistines. They were, according to historical accounts, obviously they're not first-person narratives, but they're things that scholars of history and archaeologists will assume based on the findings they have, because it's very hard to find things from 12,000 years ago. But they basically use evidence that they find to describe who the people were. And it's commonly known from the biblical text, from the Old Testament, that the tribe of Judah, the Beni Israel, conflicted with and fought with the Philistines in this piece of land. They were also referred to as the Canaanites because there was a nomenclature of the land of that area to be known as Canaan or the land of Canaan. So we're talking about the earliest human settlements, as far back as I'm going to go in this presentation, in the region, the Philistines in southern Palestine, mainly in Gaza, in the area of Asqalan, and this is where they sort of emerged as a unified group of people. And of course, there's, in the presentation here, you can read the text yourself, there are documents found from the 19th Egyptian dynasty under the rule of Ramses III that discusses war against the seafarers of what the ancient Egyptians called Palest, a cognate of the name Palestine. And so it was clear that even at that period, even at that time, this terminology of Palestine or Palest was being used as early as those periods. And so that's something that for us to ponder upon. I'll let you read the book. I'll let you read more into this, inshallah. Just you could just Google this information and start going down your own rabbit hole to get an idea of where these people came from, what they did. But definitely, as this has transformed our understanding of the ancient history of Palestine and resulted in new paradigms which revolutionized scholarly knowledge on Palestine. The other argument that he was making in the book is that the Philistines, there's an argument that the Philistines are actually not just seafarers, but they were also people indigenous to that land, that they were people who are from this land originally, and from early human settlements in the region. But I mean, I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to go into that because I cannot verify what he's saying with certainty. Palestine in classic antiquity and during the Hellenistic empires. Anybody heard of the Hellenistic period or Hellenistic empires? What does that refer to? Anybody know what that refers to? Greece. Exactly. So Alexander the Great makes his foray into the region as early as 330 BCE, before Common Era. And then he comes to rule the land of Palestine, as you see in the map. And then he, of course, extends all the way east into India and the Himalayas, into the mountains of China, basically. And so he rules over this giant empire, one of the largest empires in history. And of course, among this region is Palestine. And there's one of the first major cities that he builds is in Gaza. But Alexander the Great had a very difficult time taking Gaza. There's a story that basically when Alexander the Great and the Macedonians entered the area and tried to take it, they besieged Gaza and laid siege on it for several days and weeks, starving the local population but the men continued to fight until every last man was killed. And then the narration is that when Alexander the Great entered Gaza, only women and children remained. And so if you want to look at Gaza today, it makes a lot of sense. When they say that Uli Ba'sin Shadid, this is in the blood of the people of Gaza. They are not people who can be moved very easily. So after the death of Alexander the Great, there were different periods of rule of Greeks in the land of Palestine. And this lasts for several hundred years. Yes, sir?
Over India, and the soldiers wanted to go back because they were tired.
A lot of written records in Latin, Greek, Aramaic. Aramaic is and also covered in the annals and texts of the new religion of Christianity. Now, at this time period, the term Palestine was already being used and had been used for over a millennium, for 1,000 years. And so during the Roman period, if you look at the texts that they have in the archives, you'll see that the name Palestine was used, it was consolidated, it was popularized, and it was used in the Latin language and the Greek language. And those were the main languages, the lingua franca of the entire empire. Okay? Here I have a picture of a crazy situation that happened a few years back in Gaza. There was a very strong storm in northern Gaza, in Beit Hanun, and it flooded the region. And this guy, by coincidence, in his backyard, discovered an ancient Roman gravesite. And it caused the whole crazy situation, because the Israelis are constantly arguing that Gaza has no history. There's no legitimate, there's nothing from antiquity in this period. They're like, yeah, this is Roman, and it exists here in Gaza. And so the problem was that the Palestinians were not able to utilize this as an archaeological site, so they had to send in teams from Europe and America to come and analyze these findings in 2018. So it's very interesting. There's a whole article about it in Newsweek. You guys can read it, inshallah. You'll find that even Jewish scholars of the earliest periods were using the term Palestine as well in their texts, in the way they discuss and describe the region. This is very important to understand. Nur Masalha focuses on particular Jewish writers in the earliest periods, where he looks at what they wrote. He analyzed the Hebrew, he analyzes the Aramaic they were using. The two main writers he focuses on are Josephus and Philo. And these were Jewish philosophers, and they were contemporaries of Isa alayhi salam, who lived in the Roman province of Egypt and became the most important representative of Hellenistic Judaism. Hellenized Greek-speaking Jewish authors, such as those two, wrote in standard Greek for educated Jewish classes in the region and for Roman and Greek audiences. And like Greek and Roman writers and many Jewish Roman citizens, both of the authors understood and applied the term Palestine to Greater Palestine, extending from modern Lebanon all the way south to Egypt, and not just to Philistia, the coastal region of Palestine, which is what the most commonly is associated with the Philistines themselves, the coastal region of Palestine from Akka all the way down to Gaza, or the former land of the Philistines from Gaza to Tontul. Authors basically were writing about this region and describing it as Palestine as well. Then we get to the Byzantine period. Talked about the split of the Roman Empire. We talk about the Christian Byzantines. They have an important impact on the land of Palestine. As a matter of fact, a lot of the Islamic architecture that comes later is influenced by this period. It's influenced by the Byzantine period. Okay? Incredible amount of religious, economic, intermixing, contributions happen in this period. There are a lot of Christians who emerge in this period, of course, because it's the official religion of the empire. And so Christianity's stake is more cemented in the region, of course, after this period. And here, the second point that I want to draw your attention to is he says that the former Roman provinces of Syria, Palestina, were split by the Christian Byzantines, who also redrew the administrative regions of the country. So Palestina itself was reorganized into 3 subdivisions. So the Romans had sort of the bigger regional area of Syria, Palestine as one administrative unit. But the Byzantines split it into 3 distinct administrative units, and he mentions them here. And basically they're called Palestina Prima, Segunda, basically like the second, and then Salutaris, which is the south or the southeast region, which included the Naqab, what we know today as the Naqab and Gaza as well. So you have all of these areas, now they're administratively split in a different way based on how the early Roman period split them. And so this is interesting because this also goes to show that Palestine was seen as a distinct place. That even those who ruled it had an idea of it as a unique place. And so they looked at it differently, and they viewed it as a distinct location of its people, its culture, its politics. And so this is also very important to know when we're discussing the history of Palestine, because there are those who want to argue that there wasn't anything there before. Yes.
Has that area ever been called Israel before 1948? Is there any historical record of it being?
I mean, the only thing that we have, that we go on, is the Old Testament kingdom of Israel. Right? But that kingdom in and of itself, if we want to take what they say about it, did not last more than 80 years.
Yeah.
So despite multiple iterations of, you had the 12 tribes, you had the Hasmonean period, I'll talk about that in a little bit, because there was a Jewish revolt against the Romans at one point. And then you had the Hasmonean rebellion, essentially the Maccabees. They established their own dynasty in this area for quite some time. But in all of this period, if you want to count all of the period of what they call Jewish control of Palestine, it did not amount to more than 200 years. So the Islamic period from the time of Umar radiallahu anhu to the Crusades, was already longer, historically speaking, than the time that what they believed to be the Jewish kingdoms of Israel lasted. You understand what I'm saying? So this is also another thing that is a major point of contention, because they're arguing that, we've been there longer. Well, no, there was never autonomy of Jewish control in the region for more than a certain period of time. So if you want to use that argument, then you could look at the numbers, look at the facts. You see that, you're like, oh, this is clear where it's going. Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize if this is off topic, but I just want to understand the context. I want to understand why we're talking about history from 4,000 years ago. So it's clear that we're establishing a tradition and history in that region, that general region, for the past 4,000 years. Is Nur Musalha, though, is he alluding to or wanting us to believe that the modern day Palestinians are the same people as the Philistines from 4,000 years ago? I want to know what the argument here is.
Yeah, that's a very good question. 100 years ago, claimed indigeneity to a land that's been occupied for 4,000 years. He's showing the evidence here that, look, there's always been people here. And even the Philistines themselves, the argument that he doesn't make it here, but other historians make, is that they converted and followed the message of Musa, Dawood, and Sulaiman. And so there's no ethnic tie to a certain faith. You understand what I'm saying? They want to argue that it's only these people who are the Jews, who are the ancient children of Israel. But that's not true in and of itself. You understand what I'm saying? Because even in Islam, we don't believe that. We believe that the prophets were spreading Islam. They were not spreading Judaism, Christianity. So what he's arguing here is this is the fundamental aspect of the fundamental core argument that Zionists are making is patently false.
So he's negating their argument.
Absolutely.
He's not making an argument for the ethnic right for the current Palestinians
No.
or anything like that.
No. He's saying that there were always indigenous people there. And they follow different religions throughout time.
The Zionists have been pushing a narrative to try to change history.
Yeah.
Okay, and history is not on their side. So he went and broke it down from well before we need to even look at it, and showed entire, like, bloodline.
He shows links,
Their,
Of,
historical
of
links, right?
Palestine.
their argument is that we are an invented people.
Yeah.
Palestine is invented. The people of Palestine are invented. That we were given this name by the Ottomans.
Sure. I
And
just
one
want
of
to
the,
know,
one of the main things they also argue is that there was never a distinct national entity called Palestine, right? And so therefore, it didn't exist. But what we're saying is, beyond the confines of the idea of a nation state, right? Which only occurred in Europe in the post-Westphalian era, then you are looking at a nation, a people that have existed there for thousands of years.
They also prove scientifically that the indigenous Palestinians in Palestine today are
Are the most
genetically
closely
related
Yeah.
to
There's a good
dead they found there from 4,000 or 5,000 years
there's a really good book by a professor from, I think she's from Columbia University. Her name is Nadia Abul Hajj, and she looks at this very good. And but what she actually does is she looks at the opposite. She looks at people who claim to be descendants of the children of Israel that are in Europe, right? And so there's also another person, a Jewish professor named Shlomo Sand. Shlomo Sand wrote a whole book called The Invention of the Jewish People. And that book was very controversial, and archaeologists tried to debunk him, but he makes a very poignant argument. Yes, sir.
what was his name? Sorry.
Shlomo Sand.
When Musa alayhi salam ordered Bani Israel to go to Palestine, which is يقاتلوا الشعب الجباري.
No.
هل هم فلسطينيين? Are they the real Palestinian? And is Gaza the land where they lost, or the Sinai, or the Sahara Sea?
No, we're first, then there's something.
Roman
Yes.
first, and how far from the era of Sulaiman and Musa?
Oh, it was you're talking about thousands of years.
Thousands.
Yeah, you're talking about at least 1,500 years between the two. Yeah, and then, there's the famous ayah in the Quran, لَن نَدْخُلَهَا مَا دَامُوا فِيهَا. Yeah, we know this. But what we're saying is that archaeologically speaking, even if the Philistines were the ones who fought Bani Israel and when Talut alayhi salam led the army with Dawood and his army, and they fought against Jalut, and they defeated them. What we're arguing is that there wasn't like sort of an erasure of those people. Those people still remained. Many of them converted to Islam. And so, if you want to talk about genetically speaking, the people who are the most closely tied to or related to the children of Israel of antiquity are the Palestinian people who live there today. Not some understand. Because but what we're saying as Palestinians, we don't even need to make a genetic argument to prove who was there. What Nur Masah is saying is, forget all that stuff. Look at if you want to look at the history, we can make the argument, we can prove the point. What we're saying is now, you're using false claims about history to justify your colonization of the people. Right? And that's how flawed the Zionist narrative is. He says here in this period, did I skip a section? No, I didn't. So we know that the Arab tribes and Arab migration to the Levant happened a long time ago, right? They always say that Asl al-Arab is where?
Yemen.
Yemen. Yes, the origin of Arabs is in Yemen. Okay, so if that's the case, that means if we follow we go back to the Quran, we look at the scripture, then the catastrophe of the great floods that happened in the region led to a lot of Arabs leaving the Gulf and moving north into the Levant. Some continued into North Africa, all the way to the Sahel region. All the way to the Sahel region of Mauritania. Okay? So you have these Arab tribes who've lived now in this area for quite a long time. They're mixed. And this is before the 3rd century AD. You're talking about even before that, right? You're talking about people who have the Arab roots, the Arab lineage, who've been in this region for now more than 2,000 years. They might not have ruled, they might not have had dominion over the land of Palestine, but they were certainly present So have any of you heard that famous poem by Tamim al-Barghouthi, where he's talking about, he basically, the history of the Roman, one thing or another, everything, right? And so we have this. It's kind of absurd to think, like imagine in 1,000 years when people talk about America, they only see America as white America. That's what America was. But in reality, we're all sitting here. We're all come from different places. So that's the reality back then too. You've had people that were from different regions that lived in this land for a very, very long time. And some of them are from the region. They claim the region. You understand what I'm saying? So it's very different. In my city, we have a Facebook. It's interesting, right? I live in a small city in Minnesota called Columbia Heights, and we have a Facebook group for the city. People in the neighborhood made a Facebook group to like talk about trash pickup and street repairs and this and that, and the store and why the police are in this area and why the police are not in this area. Whatever, it's a funny group. So anyways, there's this person. We did a last week. We did a community town hall for all the neighborhood to come and talk about Gaza. We brought professors from the university. I was there. We had the mayor come. City council members came. It was nice. A lot of people came from Jeddah. It was probably like twice the size of this room. And we did it at a church. A few days after, and it was a very good discussion. People came out like fully getting an idea of what's going on. After a few days later, somebody posted on that group chat, on that Facebook group, an image that basically said, Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for more than 3,000 years. And that's it. And it's like a meme, basically. It's like a little picture. And I'm just like,
Put that in a group with Taher and Herzallah?
yeah, I didn't see it until after, and they had blocked the comments already, so I couldn't say anything. But like that just shows you that when it comes to what we offer, we're showing the world what's happening. We're giving you objective fact. I had an Israeli professor come and speak at the event, and she told the history of Zionism to the community. She's the one who explained to them what is going on. It wasn't like, we're hiding anything. We want people to know. But when it comes to how they respond to fact, they respond to it with these just wild claims that have no historical proof. They have no evidence whatsoever. They're just used as an emotional trigger to say, no, that's what we need. And that's Israel's the only place where Jews can be
It's a
safe.
war of misinformation happening in our politics.
Absolutely.
But Israel has mastered it.
Yeah.
So the focus of today and this content is for us as an Arab and Muslim society to understand the depth of our origin, but to avoid having these conversations, because when we start bringing up discussions like this, it's not going to make an impact on what's happening on the ground today.
Exactly.
And this is exactly what the Zionist regime wants. They want to control the narrative. So if we're busy talking about who belongs there, we're ignoring all the
Absolutely.
killing. And that's literally all they want to do. They want to keep that discussion because they control that narrative.
It's a red herring.
Yeah.
It's a red herring, 100%. And that's basically what Musal is doing with this book. He's not, and he refers to Zionism a lot in the book, even though Zionism came way later. Like he's basically always talking about how Zionism uses these moments in history, or tries to co-opt, or tries to obfuscate truth about these moments in history in order to build a narrative to essentially justify its actions in Palestine. Talked about the Arab tribes in the region. The earliest tribes and one of the most powerful Arab tribes was the Ghassan, and then there's the Lakhmid tribes, but Lakhmids were mainly in Iraq. But the Hassani tribes were the ones in the Sham, even before the advent of Islam, before the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So then we have this Islamic period. And actually, going back to this, there was a Palestinian Sahabi. Anybody know his name?
Yes. Tamim al-Dari.
Tamim bin Aus al-Dari, yes. Tamim al-Dari,
Khalili.
and he was a Khalili. Yes, anybody here from Khalili?
My wife is.
Okay. You know what's crazy about the Khalila, even back then, and I'll talk about this a little bit. Actually, I'll talk about it right now. When the Khalifa Umar radiallahu anhu came to Palestine after the Battle of Yarmouk, and the Muslims had destroyed basically the Roman army in the Battle of Yarmouk. Khalid bin Walid led an incredible attack on this superior army, destroyed them completely, basically rendered them useless, essentially, and the Byzantines had to withdraw. And then that opened the door for the taking over of Palestine. But that army was led by Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, and Amr ibn As, and all these people that, from the major Sahaba that we know. And Tamim bin Aus al-Dari was a Sahabi, so he had met the Prophet ﷺ and given him bay'ah. And he already had gone back to Palestine during the time of the Prophet and started spreading Islam. So his tribe was Muslim already. So there's already Muslims in Palestine before the Muslims came to control Palestine. You guys follow what I'm saying? So it's not like, it's only when Umar and the armies came that they brought Islam with them. No, in fact, Islam had already reached, obviously, because people are engaging with, and all over the Sham, with the Prophet ﷺ. So this is something that is, is a common also misnomer, that Islam came through conquest. But no, Islam was already in the region before. That wasn't a majority of people. In fact, even after the armies of Umar took over Palestine, for quite some time, Muslims were a minority in this land. Because it was still mainly Greek Orthodox Christians who were in the land. And so, this is also important to understand. And that's why Umar, one of the first things he did, and basically where he laid out the ground rules for how Muslims will rule in this land moving forward. Right? And he made basically a mutual agreement with the Christians of Palestine. And this is very important to, and a lot of people study this now, like scholarship studies this because it's very unique for a conqueror to make concessions to people he conquered without them doing anything. You understand? Like it's so they're like baffled by this. Like Europeans are baffled by this. Like why would he do that? But subhanAllah, Islam is ummatan wasata, but also the ummah is ummah to all these faith groups of this land. And so in order for us to maintain peace, stability, and security, we have to come to agreements about this. Yeah, we might have the power to beat you down, but that's not the objective, right? And subhanAllah, that led to, facilitated to a lot of people converting to Islam later on in the years. And of course, then Palestine becoming a majority Muslim country. Now, Palestinians, obviously, 95% of Palestinians are Muslim, right? So, this is all because of this period, and basically this the way that the Muslims dealt with Palestine. There was somebody that had their hand up in the back. Sorry, I missed you. Yes, Haji.
Just want to clarify the wording conquer and occupation doesn't really fit the Islamic, and we can't say Muhammad conquered or occupied. I think it's
Yes.
different language would be.
Yeah, I know we use the term futuhat, opened. Yeah, you could say liberated from the tyranny of polytheism and from injustice. Definitely. Point well taken, inshallah. Nonetheless, Muslims established political dominance over these areas. So whether you want to call it conquering or opening, nonetheless, Muslims established.
I think that's an important topic, right? Like we as Muslims, right, cannot spin reality.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Now, we call it futuhat, that's an Islamic term, right, for conquest. Now, there's a vast difference between conquest and occupation and colonization, right? And justice, you can conquer a land and administer justice in it. You cannot occupy a land and administer justice because occupation in itself is antithetical to justice. Right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I get what the brother's saying, and I agree with it, because, and the brother in the back, because the term occupation indicates that they have a foreign army taking over indigenous people's land, exploiting it,
Correct.
and then leaving eventually. Colonization is where they take over people's land and they intend on staying in it, right? And then you have settler colonization, where you have people taking over the land, staying in it, removing the indigenous population and replacing it with their own, which is what's happening today in Palestine, right? So you have different layers, right? The Americans occupied Iraq. They had occupation of Iraq. They didn't stay in Iraq. That's not their land. They didn't intend to replace the Iraqi people. The Israelis, on the other hand, the Zionists, intend to replace the Palestinian people. That's why they're engaged in a genocidal campaign in Gaza right now.
But Umar
Umar radiallahu anhu
never displaced. the
Exactly. There was no
population.
displacement taking place.
There wasn't even an occupation.
And there was no, well, the Muslim armies remained, but that's because you still had Byzantium at your doorstep. You had to defend the land that you freed. A lot of them. Even Bilal radiallahu anhu, Khalid bin Walid stayed in Sham, So a lot of these guys, they didn't go back to these regions. And so the official language of Jund Philistine, which is how they designated the language, like a version of Greek for the longest time. They used Greek in administrative courts of Philistine. Years after the Umayyad period started, that we saw Arabic becoming an official language of the region. So yeah, I don't have to go through all this. Inshallah, we can. This is a lot of text. I don't want to have bore you guys because it's getting late. But something Nur Masalha says, and mind you, Nur Masalha is not a Muslim. He's a Palestinian Christian. Okay? But the way he talks about Muslim rule in Palestine is very endearing and it's very important to reflect on. Because he says that there's not a single period in Palestine's history, and he's a historian, he's an archaeologist, he looked all the way back. He said not a single period in Palestine's history that had as much cosmopolitanism, that had as much progress, that had as much openness, that had as much knowledge and intellectual production, that had as much interfaith cooperation and relationships as the Islamic period. By far, there's no doubt in his mind, and based on his research, that this is true. So, the Muslims ushered in a period of prosperity, of religious toleration, and cultural autonomy for even Christians and Jews who lived in the region at the time. And I think this is very important for us to understand and reflect on, because like we were talking about before, the little discussion we had, the idea wasn't to go conquer people, to subdue them. The idea was to free people so that their minds can be freed, so they can come to the proper conclusions and return back to their fitrah, which eventually leads you to Islam. Right? So this is an important aspect of Muslim rule, and why some people today would argue to lead the worldview of one group is be a Muslim engaged in a struggle against enemies. Right? Not just against enemies, but against empires. So there's degrees of truth to that, yes. But also does not mean that we can't ignore the fact that this goes back to something fundamental. 5 minutes? Thank you. I'll end it with this, so we can do some Q&A, inshallah. And I wanted to go a little bit more into the Islamic period, and I want to actually go beyond. Okay, so you had the Umayyad period after the Khilafah, Rashida, you had the Umayyad period that lasted for quite some time, and then you had the Abbasi period after the Abbasi revolution. But the Abbasis moved the political capital of Islam from Damascus to where? To Baghdad, yes. Okay, so the political importance of Palestine remained, but not so much as it was during the Umayyad period. Now you'll find that most of the major Islamic sites today in Palestine were built by the Umayyads, right? So one of the most famous places that we know in Palestine, what is it called? The Dome of the Rock, today was built by the Umayyads. And it's the longest standing building, like Muslim worship site in the world. Obviously besides the Kaaba. So that's incredible. I mean, that's really incredible if you think about it. Talking about something that's lasted for 1,300 years. SubhanAllah. So this is something that we, no other cultural group or civilization can claim that in Palestine. Right? Besides the Christian community who has the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that we have the church in Gaza that was bombed, that was 3,000 years old. They said it was it's 2,000 something years old. So you have these old buildings in Palestine that exist still today, but now they're being erased by this occupation, who has no respect for history, for heritage, for culture whatsoever. They want to erase everything and build it in their own image. So this is what he says in the beginning of the book, but I wanted to put it in this part of the presentation because it goes back to the argument that we were making. It says, in the modern era, beginning with the late 19th century, European Zionist leaders appropriated the Old Testament narratives as historical accounts and used them instrumentally to justify their settler colonial project and their conflict with the indigenous people of Palestine. Okay? SubhanAllah, I want to stop. And that's the crux of the issue. And it forces us to have a discussion like this, unfortunately. Because there's so much misinformation. There's so much diversion. There's so much, my wife was showing me today, she had this huge debate with a Zionist lady on Instagram. She posted about going to the march that they did in Washington, D.C., the pro-Israel march the other day, the support the genocide march, that I call it. And they're arguing, the arguments they make no sense. Like zero sense. You are literally saying, we want a ceasefire so people can stop dying. And they're saying, no, we have to wipe them out. And they're saying it in public. And so people are reading this, and my wife continued to engage in the discussion because it was revealing who they were more. She's not trying to convince the Zionists to be better. No. She was trying to show all these other people that are now observing this conversation thread of how ridiculous the claims are being made by the other side. That they do actually support killing. That's really what it is. Fundamentally, that's what it is. And so, at the end of the day, you have a project that seeks to erase the Palestinian people, their history, this thousands of years, legacy and heritage that goes back to the times of the prophets, and now they're trying to reduce it to basically building a suburb of Europe in our region. Removing the ancient olive trees. Some of them are 2,000 years old. 2,000-year-old trees in Palestine. They're removing them and they're planting cypress trees from Europe. That's what the Jewish National Front does. That's the kind of stuff that's not just having an impact on the people. It's not just the people that are being erased in Palestine. It's the geography that's being changed. It's the topography of the land that's being changed. The climate, the ecosystem is being changed to be more suitable to people who came from Europe. So you're talking about an ethnic cleansing, but you're talking about a climate disaster that's taking place in Palestine. Actually, what's crazy is every now and then you have a forest fire in Israel because these cypress trees just start burning. And they asked the world for help to put out the fires. So I remember Turkey sent some planes the other time, a few years back, to put out the fires. Jordan contributed. Everybody's standing strong together. And so that's just why did they plant these trees though? They plant them to cover the ruins of the Palestinian towns and villages that they destroyed in 1948. And one scholar just did a study 2 years ago, I remember reading this, where basically she did a whole study of all the land of historic Palestine and where the Zionists have colonized and built their cities so far. So she took all the land of Tel Aviv, all the land of Haifa, Yafa, Akka, the Naqab. She took all the land that is comprised of Israel today. And you know what she said? She found that only 8% of the land of historic Palestine is actually populated. Meaning that the possibilities of return are there. Our land is just being covered by trees, and now they have designated national forest areas of where we used to live. And so they want to hide that fact. They want to hide that fact. But the reality is, it's like the whole project is built on a house of cards. You have false narrative, you have lies that are used to constantly argue it. You need the United States and a very powerful empire to support you in order to survive, as we see since October 7th. Without them, Israel would be nothing. And you need also to dehumanize the people who you're killing in order to make and justify their killing. And so, without these things, without this formula, Israel becomes, fizzles away.
It's a full picture.
It fizzles away, right? So when we engage in intellectual thought and discourse on these topics, it's a very dangerous thing for them. And if you notice, one of the things that I want to bring to your attention, after October 7th, the first thing the United States Senate did, anybody know what it was? They passed a resolution condemning students that work on Palestine. Now you would think in your mind, what in the world? Why would the United States Senate be concerned with what students on campuses across the country are doing in this moment? But that just shows you that for them, the discourse and narrative shift that's taking place in America is an existential threat. Because if they realize, they see the writing on the wall. I mean, yesterday I was listening to a leaked audio clip of the head of the Anti-Defamation League, a very Zionist organization. His name is Jonathan Greenblatt. And he's saying on this call, he basically had a call with other Jewish leaders. And he's saying in this audio recording that what we're dealing with right now, he's saying, what we're dealing with right now is not an issue between left and right. It's not an issue between left and right. It's an issue between young and old. He's saying it openly. So what do? They attack the youth. They attack the students. They repress student activism on campus. They use the powers of the administration to clamp down on student organizing. They suspend SJPs and Jewish Voice for Peace chapters on campus, which they did at Columbia University. They're trying to label student groups as aligned with terrorism. So for example, in the state of Florida, the governor demanded and issued a demand for state universities to shut down SJPs because of material support for terrorism. That's the battle they're engaged in. Because they're so scared of what they know is inevitable. Because once that dam breaks and the flood takes place, nothing can save the Zionist project. So that's why it's important for us to continue doing this work. It's important for us to continue supporting the efforts of students despite the pressure and the repression that we're dealing with right now. Because what is the old adage? You know who your leaders are by who your enemy attacks. Right? You know what the real issue is based on where the enemy is focusing their attention, where the arrows are pointing. Right? What's the that's whom. You know what I'm talking about. So for us, this is what is important to think about. In fact, I saw a couple hands in the back. I want to give you guys a chance to ask your questions. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. That's what I have for you today. Yeah, go ahead. I'll take your questions. I saw some brothers in the back. Actually, go ahead.
Tell us about your Urban 11 experience.
My Urban 11 experience, yeah, sure. You know, I guess you could say reminiscent of or closely tied to the time that we're in now. In 2009, we know Israel attacked Gaza, Operation Cast Lead, killed 1,400 people in a span of 21 days. And that was the first, what we considered major assault on Gaza, at least in my memory. I was an undergraduate student. I was just at that time, when the attack was happening, I was at a mass Tarbiyah camp in California. So I didn't have reception, I didn't have my phone. So I'm coming back down the mountain from Santa Barbara, and all of a sudden I start getting a phone call from my dad. Pick it up, and I say, what's going on? He says, شوف شو صار في غزة? I'm like, no. اليوم قصفوها. And I didn't fully understand what was going on. I get home, I look at the news, and I see a full-scale assault. This is December 2008. Full-scale assault on Gaza. Just pure madness, destruction. So subhanAllah, that February, after the attack, we heard of a delegation that was going to Gaza. And it was a humanitarian aid convoy that was going to break the siege on Gaza, deliver humanitarian aid. They had just done one from the UK, where they drove vehicles from the UK all the way across North Africa into Gaza, and they were successful. So the guy who was organizing it, George Galloway, who was a British parliamentarian, wanted to organize something similar from the United States. So I'm an undergraduate student. I don't have money. I'm not going to go ask my dad for money to go to Gaza. So what did I do? Took a student loan. Took a student loan. I went to the guys that are organizing the trip. I said, I'm going to go, here's the money for my ticket. I'm going to go with you to Gaza. So I go to Gaza. Then I told my parents I'm going to Gaza. And then, my dad was actually very supportive. My mom was like, Inta Majnoon. And in July of 2009, just 6 months after the attack on Gaza, we were in Gaza, delivering humanitarian aid. And I entered Gaza, it was at night. The Egyptians gave us a hard time, sorry. They were not letting us in. They didn't want to let us take any of this is during the Mubarak era too. This is Arham. They didn't want to take us, they blocked us from taking vehicles. We had purchased vehicles from China, 45 vehicles, trucks that we were going to take to Gaza so they can convert them into ambulances. They refused to let us take them from Alexandria. We spent about a week and a half in Egypt stuck, trying to get into Gaza because the Mukhabarat and the military were not letting us go in. Anyways, we finally convinced the American embassy to tell them to let us in. They said on one condition, two conditions. Number one, you sign this document here in the US Embassy saying that once you enter Gaza, the United States government is no longer responsible for you, and then you pay us money for that. And then number two is you're only allowed to stay in Gaza for 24 hours. So we're like, you know what? Something is better than nothing. We have all these trucks loaded with stuff. What are we going to do? We're going to take it. So we go, 200 Americans. I don't know if anybody from Texas was there. We had guys from New Jersey, from California. We go, and we get to Rafah border crossing, which is the southern crossing between Egypt and Gaza. We get there around noon. The Egyptians don't let us in to Gaza until 9 p.m. They let us in at night. Why? Because they didn't want the crowds that were waiting to welcome us and make a big scene in the media. So they prevented us from going in. On top of that, we have to pay an exit fee from Egypt to go to them. Yeah. And then the guy they had at the passport, I just have a lot of memories of Egypt, The guy they had at the passport, he basically took all of our passports. And he was sitting, mind you, there's 200 of us. And he's writing down by hand the names of every single person. There's no scanner, there's no computer typing, nothing. And I'm like, this is going to take forever. And I go to him and I say, can we help you? He's like, لا تخصصي. I was like, wow, this is my specialty, he said. I said, okay. So anyways, we get into Gaza at night. We get on these buses that they furnished for us. Air-conditioned buses, very nice. They took our bags, and they take us to the Commodore Hotel in Gaza. Commodore Hotel is one of the nicer hotels with all the journalists and human rights workers. Are you from Gaza? Okay. Anybody here from Gaza? Okay, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about these things, or you never been to Gaza?
We went, we visited, not last summer, the summer before.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Commodore Hotel is still there, maybe. I haven't checked. But it was right next to the, you've experienced the model, you know what it's like. And we get there at night, they provide us dinner, chicken dinner, very nice. Each person gets his own chicken with rice, and then they put on the table the drink. Pop the can open, fizzles, and it tastes like 7-Up, but it doesn't look like 7-Up. So I asked these guys, I'm like, what is it? He's like, oh, هذا صنع محلي. They make their own soda. And I was like, yeah. I was like, okay. So then I'm talking to these guys, I'm talking to the guys they had with us who were students at the Islamic University who spoke English. Because we had a lot of people who didn't speak Arabic, they were in our group. So the people are talking to them, they're very nice and cordial. And then I asked one of the guys a question. I said, how many tunnels do you guys have? And he said, according to some estimates, we have 1,400 tunnels that go from Gaza to Egypt, and inside Gaza too. And now the Israelis, they talk about the Gaza tunnels. You know what they call it? The Gaza Metro. It's such an intricate system of tunnels. But it was used by civilians. They were telling me that we could bring a Humvee truck into the tunnel. We bring cow into the tunnels. We bring everything. And Rafah, Egypt, because there's two Rafahs, there's Rafah Gaza, Rafah Egypt. Rafah Egypt was doing really good financially because the economy was booming due to the Palestinians buying and selling with the people through the tunnel system. But then, of course, we know what happened in 2013. I'll let you guys have another lecture about that. So after I came back from Gaza, and I'm not in Gaza, I'm experiencing this, I'm seeing some of my family members for the first time. My dad was born in Gaza, so we have a lot of family there. His aunts live there, his cousins live there. So I'm meeting everybody. And the first thing we did in the morning was we went to the Jabalia refugee camp. The Jabalia refugee camp in 2009 was completely destroyed by airstrikes, left the people under the rubble. So we go to Jabalia to assess the damage. And I'll tell you this, I've never seen damage like this in my life. I've never seen entire neighborhoods flattened. Like it was a scene from like War of the Worlds or something. I can't really describe the feeling to you. And we go and we're looking at these families, and some of them are still living under the rubble. Like if there's a house that was partially destroyed and has still some cover, they were still sleeping there because there was nowhere else for them to go. We saw UN facilities that were bombed. We saw schools that were bombed. I saw a school bus that was bombed. We saw ambulances that were bombed. We went to a Shifa hospital, the hospital that's at the center of everybody's attention right now. We met with a girl who's from the Samuni family. The Samuni family was completely eradicated in 2009. Completely killed. All the members of the family were killed. Right? And that was crazy at that time. Oof, one entire family was wiped out. Now, you have 100 entire families were wiped out. This is to show you the scale of the attack, the current attack on Gaza. So we meet with this man after we meet with the Samuni girls, who they pulled from underneath the rubble, they saved him. But everybody else in his family was killed. And the reason I'm giving you a big context to the story because it impacted my life in a very good way. They pulled this guy out, he comes and he greets us, smiling, he's talking to us. And you know what he tells us? He says, I appreciate you guys coming from America to deliver aid, but that's not what I need from you. He says, in Gaza, we can take care of ourselves. We don't need your blankets. We don't need your socks. We don't need your band-aids. We don't need anything. We don't need food. We can figure that out. What we need from you in America is to stop the next attack on Gaza. He knew that. Mind you, his wife was killed, his children were killed, his aunts and uncles were killed, everybody's gone in his family. But look at the wherewithal, the cognitive ability, the vision, the political astuteness of the Ghazawi people. They know what the root cause of the problem is. He could have asked me for anything at that moment, and I would have given him the clothes on my back. Because I'm like, feel ashamed. But he didn't ask for money, he didn't ask for anything. He said, go back to America and stop the next attack on Gaza. Because he knew that Gaza was a sore thumb, was a thorn in the side of this colonial project. So long as Gaza remained like that, more attacks were coming. So we go back to California. I lived in California. And we hear a few months later that the ambassador of Israel to the United States is coming to speak at our university. Michael Oren, his name. And he's the former U.S. Israeli ambassador to the U.S. So his office was in Washington, D.C., and he was coming. The reason why the Israelis were doing this tour was because they had a major PR problem after the attack on Gaza in 2009. That was one of the moments where the mainstream narrative started shifting on Israel. And so they sent their ambassadors and their diplomats and the Israeli soldiers all over the world to have talks on university campuses and all over the world to whitewash Israel's crimes. We knew that. Shabab hit me up, they said, hey, you see Irvine? The ambassador's coming, let's do something. I said, okay. I went, because I used to go to a different campus. I went to Riverside. I went to the Shabab, I told them we needed to organize something. They said we're ready to go. Anyways, long story short, we organized a protest of the ambassador at the room. About 600 people sitting inside, 500 people sitting inside, one of the biggest auditoriums in the university. And as soon as he gets on stage, the interruptions begin. 10 of us interrupted him, were arrested, and taken by the police. Then the other students in our group all stood up and did a walkout of the speech while protesting. And while they were walking out, one other guy was grabbed by the police and made us 11. That's why we have Irvine 11 now. It was unintentional. Only 10 guys who, before this protest, agreed to continue to protest despite the threat of arrest, because we knew that there might be arrests made. So we had to calculate what we're going to do. Anyways, arrested by the police, booked same night, and released the same night. We didn't spend time in jail. The university emails us the next morning saying we need to talk. Oh, okay. Mind you, I'm a student organizer and activist. We've done many protests on campus before. So it's highly unusual that the police arrest you for engaging in a protest. Usually they take you, they pull you out of the room, they kick you out. Or usually the university says, all right guys, cut it out, It's part of university culture. In this instance, we had the double fanged attack on us, on the students. They put me on academic probation, okay? They suspended not just some of the students who were involved in the protest, I wasn't suspended, but they suspended the student organization, Muslim Student Union, for its involvement in the protest. And that's unprecedented, because the university will not even suspend fraternities when they do hazing of new members. When fraternities, a new member comes in, they beat him and they beat him up, sometimes they go to the hospital. The university doesn't even suspend the fraternity when they do that. Like when people are being, but they suspended the Muslim Student Union for allegedly organizing the protest of Michael Oren. Anyways, we had our attorneys, and then about almost a year later, the district attorney of Orange County decided to file charges against us and criminally prosecute us in court. So we had to deal with that, the university, and then we had to deal with the criminal prosecution. After about, we were charged in February 2011. Our trial was in September 2011. After that whole 9-month period of going back and forth, court, hearings, going through a 2.5-week trial, having a jury, they had a jury. They assigned the head of the homicide division of the DA's office. You know what the homicide guy, what he does? He's the one who tries cases of murder. They had the top attorney in their office prosecuting student protesters over a misdemeanor. They wasted an incredible amount of resources and time. They subpoenaed all of our emails. They subpoenaed Yahoo and Google for all of our emails, because people used to use Yahoo back then. I know some of the older folks still use it, it's okay. And they took 20,000 documents of emails to try to prove not only that we disrupted the event, but that we conspired to commit a crime. So they charged us with 2 things. The disruption of a public event and conspiracy to commit a crime. All the district attorney had to do was go to the jury and prove to them that we substantially disrupted the event. Not that we completely shut it down, or not that we substantially disrupted the event, which we did. I'll tell you that. That was the whole purpose. We wanted to disrupt the ambassador because of what he was saying. So he convinced the jury that we disrupted the event. Now he had to convince the jury that we conspired to commit the crime. That we knew that what we were doing is wrong, which we didn't know. We didn't know we were going to be arrested. and that we did it on purpose anyways. So he brought all the email evidence saying that look, they planned this protest, which everybody does, everybody plans a protest. It's not unusual. And he did something different though. Just to show you the level they're willing to go to. He put my picture on the screen. This is opening arguments, the first day of the trial. Put my picture, and he put the picture of the president of the Muslim Student Union, Muhammad Abdul at the time. He put my picture because I was the president of the MSA West, which is like a West, that's like Lone Star MSA kind of. You guys have that here? Similar. And you know what he said? He said, these Muslim student organizations have allegedly been tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. Mind you, he's telling this to a jury in Orange County, California. These people know nothing about anything. They're just, most of them were white, sitting in this jury that they don't want to be on anyways. They just feel like they're wasting their time. They see 11 young Muslim men, beards and all, sitting in court. The automatic assumption from them is that if they're here, they must have done something wrong. Right? They, like the Orange County court has an 85% conviction rate. 85% of the cases that go to the Orange County court are convicted, found guilty by the jury. So we knew going into the trial that this was going to be a very uphill battle. Because not only are you fighting against a very ludicrous legal statute, arguing against it, you're also fighting against people's perception of who you are. Our lawyers, you know what they were telling us? Maybe you guys should shave your beards before you come to the trial. Maybe you guys shouldn't pray in public in the corridors so they don't get a sense of fear. Of course, when we're young, Shabab, we don't take that from anybody. So we grew our beards out longer. We were fasting. We made public dua. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. We didn't care. I mean, we were like, whatever, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. We knew we were gonna be found guilty. So then the jury, after 2.5 weeks of trial, the bailiff receives the verdict. You know, you guys watch those shows where the bailiff says that they have to read the verdict? And she says, on the charge of disruption of a public event, the jury finds the defendant, Taher Herzallah, guilty. Show this other paper. On the charge of conspiracy to commit a crime, the jury finds the defendant, Taher Herzallah, guilty. Now mind you, we weren't the only ones in the courtroom. Our families were there, my mom, my aunt, all the students' families, student leaders, community shuyukh. I mean, yes, Al-Qadi flew in to come and witness our trial. You know, all these people were there. And people start to cry. One person is so angry, she starts yelling and she leaves the room. And us, because we expected that result, it wasn't as shocking. But the response from the community is what was like, that hits you, you know what I mean? When you see your mom crying, it's not something that you like to see. So anyways, now it goes back to the judge. The judge had to decide what the punishment is going to be. Now that the jury has found you guilty, there are limits to what the judge can do. So he can't say, I'm going to give you 10 years in prison. No, there's limits to what the judge can do. However, there was a precedent set before that if you're convicted on conspiracy to commit a crime, you can spend up to 6 months in prison. And we're like, all right, we'll wait for what the judge is going to say. And I started planning what I'm going to do in prison. We had one of the guys with us, his name is Aslam, he was a hafiz. I was like, Aslam, you're going to be with me, bro. You know, we're going to... So, obviously, you know, we're young, we're making a joke out of it. But to our families, it was a serious thing. Because people see it as a boon in your future. The judge comes back. SubhanAllah, it's crazy. Comes back and he said, considering that these young men acted on what they believe to be principle and have a strong conviction in what they did that day, prison will not be an appropriate solution to mitigate this situation. He says that if I were to send them to prison now, I would make them political martyrs. And so with that being said, my judgment is 56 hours of community service and to pay a few $100 restitution fee. Man. I was like, you guys put us through this for a year to give us community service? And you should have seen the DA. The DA won the case. But after the judgment came from the judge, it's as if he lost the case. He was livid. He went outside. The media is trying to talk to him. He's like, this is a sham. This judge he was yelling at the judge. We had our press conference. It was a victory for us. We were standing up, happy, but at the same time, we were concerned that this is going to have a chilling effect on students across the country. That if students see us being punished for doing something so simple as a protest, then what's going to happen to the whole movement? So our message to the students around the world who are watching this, don't worry about the consequences. Because if they're coming after us this hard, that means they're worried about the work that you're doing. That means you need to up the ante. That means you need to do more. And certainly, if the Zionists who were behind this, I know we need to end it, I apologize. If the Zionists who were behind this intended to put a dagger in the student movement for Palestine in that moment, I'll tell you, they failed utterly. Because after that, we saw an invigorated student movement, passing boycott resolutions in more than 45 campuses across the country. We went from having 30 Students for Justice in Palestine chapters to having 200 Students for Justice in Palestine chapters. Everybody was going to throw down now. Everybody was going to get in the game now. That's it. Because now you have a cause. Now you see the impact of the work that you're doing. The Zionists, they mobilized everyone on our case. We had representatives from the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles come to the trial to talk to the district attorney to give him points about what to say. They were invested in this on a government level. And they still failed to break our will. So that's why when we see the people of Gaza today, we see, despite what is happening, despite US aircraft carriers, Hellfire missiles, everything that is being thrown at the people of Gaza, they cannot break their will. People still come out from underneath the rubble, say, Alhamdulillah, oh, free Palestine, we support the resistance. Oof. You killed the man's kids. You killed his wife. You killed his mom. He still comes out saying, we're still going to fight you. That means you can't break people like this. You can't break an idea. You can't break a desire for freedom, despite what the consequences might be. This is a lesson that we've learned in history. This is a lesson that we're watching and learning from right now in real time. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you all. Inshallah, make us among those who Allah uses and not replaces. And make us among those who stand firmly for justice. Allahumma أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. بارك الله فيكم.
So in conclusion, you proved your Ghazali.
By the way, I interviewed Taher Herzallah a few years ago on the whole trial. If you want to look that up, just search for MLFA Irvine 11 podcast. You'll find it. It's on YouTube.
I'll make this very quick, inshallah. We will be holding a night of prayer for Gaza on this coming Saturday from 10 p.m. to Fajr. If you can attend, please attend. There will be a qiyam, dua, and more spiritual education, inshallah. Also, if you want to watch any of the previous seminars, take a this real quick. I'll leave it up here for a second. We have also included the ability for you to sign up for the halaqah, get connected with CYP, and volunteer as well.
Can you go back to the first one?
Yes. And then inshallah now we're going to wrap up with a quick dua. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم ثبت إخواننا في فلسطين وغزة. اللهم اربط على قلوبهم وثبت الأرض من تحت أقدامهم. اللهم أطعم جائعهم وآمن خائفهم ورد غائبهم واشف مصابهم وتقبل شهداءهم في الجنة وارزق أهلهم الصبر والتسليم. اللهم احفظ عليهم أولادهم وديارهم وأمنهم وأمانهم وانصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم. اللهم كن لهم عونا ونصيرا وعلى عدوهم ظاهرا وقديرا. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من عدوك وعدوهم فألق الرعب في قلوب عدوهم وفرق جمعهم وأرنا فيهم آية. اللهم آمين. Praise be to Allah, ruler of the worlds, and may the peace and blessings be on the most honorable messenger and Prophet Muhammad and on his family and companions. O Allah, help and protect the people of Palestine. O Allah, ease their pain and suffering. O Allah, bestower of mercy, bestow your mercy on them. O Allah, open people's hearts to give in this time of crisis. O Allah, plot for them and suffice them with what you please. If you support them, then nobody can overpower them. And if you forsake them, then no one will be able to support them after you. O Allah, assist our brothers and sisters in Palestine and Gaza and remove from them oppression and persecution. Grant them safety and tranquility and bestow peace upon their land. O Lord of the world, support them and protect them from all harm. O Allah, grant them strength and patience in the face of adversity and make them a beacon of hope in our hearts. O Allah, unite their hearts and grant them the strength to endure and stand firm. O answerer of prayers, hear our supplication for the people of Palestine. Have mercy on them and strengthen their resolve. Ameen. And may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon Muhammad, his family, and noble companions.
جزاك الله خير.